Immersing yourself in all things soccer ahead of this summer's World Cup? I'm Alex Abnos, senior sports editor from The Guardian. Whether you're a soccer beginner or you know the game inside and out, we've got you covered. From one of the fastest growing soccer newsrooms, The Guardian brings you in-depth World Cup coverage that gets into the winners and losers on and off the pitch. Read, watch, and listen as our journalists connect the dots between the games, the cultures, and this political moment. We'll have daily newsletters throughout the tournament, a global perspective, and a squad of Americans, including me, on the ground with the U.S. national team. Plus, if you want to test your soccer knowledge, try On the Ball. It's a game in the Guardian app, and it's really, really fun. And if you're into stuff like this...
Well, I think the problem is if you give footballers an inch, they will take a mile.
Is it too much when it's this close?
It's a bit much. It's a bit too real. Maybe you could just talk with a slight delay.
Be sure to listen to our Football Weekly podcast for on-the-move expert analysis. The Guardian, bringing you the whole picture on soccer. Search Guardian Soccer for more.
Business is booming, but you know what really helped? Xero, the accounting platform for small businesses. I used to think unpaid bills were just part of it. Ugh. But batch payments? Wow. Automated accounts payable? Even better. All in one place. That's a big one. And I can keep track from my phone while I get the job done. No bills in sight. What a life. Do right by yourself and your business and search Xero for your free trial. Conditions apply.
Now, finding a doctor is a little less challenging. United Health Group is investing in tools that make it easier for patients to navigate healthcare and pay less. These transparency tools help patients find providers, and this is the big thing: compare costs up front. The big picture? More transparent pricing benefits everyone. And these tools from United Health Group can help patients save hundreds of dollars annually. Learn more at unitedhealthgroup.com/commitment.
Welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
To me, being perfect is not about that scoreboard out there.
This is a chance of a lifetime.
When you can understand the person, you can then work towards a common goal.
We are all on the same team.
Know your role and do it to the best of your ability.
Focus on the fundamentals that we've gone over time and time again.
Your defense has got to be better.
Leave no doubt tonight.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
Hello and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast. My name is Paul Barnard, and here on the podcast, we believe that there is no algorithm for leadership. And so we interview great sports coaches from around the world to try and find ideas to help all of us be better leaders. Our great coach on this episode is Kathy Delaney-Smith. Kathy led the Harvard women's basketball team for 40 years. During her tenure, she led them to over 600 career wins, 11 Ivy League championships, and 6 NCAA Tournament berths. She is the winningest coach in the history of the Ivy League in any sport, men's or women's. This is Kathy's second time on the podcast, and she's back because she's just written a book called Grit and Wit, Empowering Lives and Leaders. The book is co-authored with one of her ex-players, Laura Barnard, who is now a sought-after leadership consultant. And I'm lucky enough to have them both here with me today. And just before we go to the interview, today's podcast is brought to you by the Macquarie University Business School's MBA program. Designed to empower, challenge and transform, the Macquarie MBA gives you the business skills and knowledge you need to succeed in an evolving global economy. To find out more, search for Macquarie University Business School's MBA. And now, please enjoy my discussion on Grit and Wit with Kathy and Laura.
You're listening to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Good morning, Kathy Delaney-Smith, and welcome back to the Great Coaches Podcast.
I am thrilled to be here, and I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this, but I love listening to your podcast. I think you do great work, Paul.
Thank you, Kathy. I do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Before I ask you where you are in the world, I'm going to introduce, well, the second member of this interviewed team today, Laura Barnard. Laura, hello, and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Thank you, Paul. I'm a huge fan as well, and so happy to be here with you both.
Well, both of you have written a great book called Grit and Wit, Empowering Lives and Leaders. It's about Kathy's journey as a coach, but Laura, you're one of the co-authors. And I guess my first question, Kathy, is the title, Grit and Wit, Empowering Lives and Leaders. Was that an easy title to come up with?
I guess I'm going to say no, because I was married. I would say, Laura, this process took us about 3 years, maybe a little under 3 years. And I was married to a different title and dead set on this title. And I thought no one could talk me out of it. And so I'll tell you what the title that I was married to was: Get Your Head Out of Your Ass, You're Missing Out. And I just thought if I saw that in a bookstore or online, I would buy it. And other titles that were discussed were, in my opinion, boring, and they are mantras that I use. So as mantras, they're not boring. Perfect is boring is one of them. Act as if is another. And those are very powerful mantras, but boring titles for a book. There was another one that was called, Lessons from the Winningest Coach You've Never Heard of. So that throws in a little humor, but still, meh. So at the very end, I was convinced that I can't use foul language in the title because I might rule out someone. And so Grit and Wit got created with a little help from my son. I will confess, AI threw some things my way. And I was comfortable with it because it does take grit to coach for 51 years. Anyone who has coached anywhere near that amount of years needs a lot of grit, because I think coaching is rewarding but very, very difficult. And you need thick skin, and it's not easy, and it's the ever-changing generations and parenting. So it takes grit, and some of my players, or a lot of my players, have told me I have wit. And I think initially it was by accident. I was funny when I wasn't trying to be, and not funny when I did try to be. So, and I believe wit is the magic sauce. I use humor in every aspect of my life. So it was very appropriate. And then empowering lives and leaders, I learned that I did that when I wrote this book. So throw it all together, and that's a good title, I guess.
Well, I think the title for this podcast is going to be Get Your Head Out of Your Ass. I think that's what we should put out into the world. Let's do it. Laura might be a bit upset with that. Laura, I'll come to you in a minute and ask you about the book. I'd like to just ask a follow-up first, Kathy. You say in the front of the book that you hope the book can serve as a mentor and make other people's journey easier than yours. Now, can I ask you to unpack the word easier for us and explain what decisions or actions you hope will be easier for people after they've read?
Easier might be the wrong word, but I will say my path was very non-traditional. So I guess I'm viewing it as bumpy, complicated, twists and turns. And I am at a place where I view mentorship as one of the most valuable things we can do in our lives on all levels, professionally especially. And I didn't really have a mentor other than my mother. So I kid with my early teams, and I explain that they were my lab experiments. Like everything I did was on the job, trial and error. I apologize for all the error, but we all came through it well. And so I say, why reinvent the wheel? Why don't we reach out and go to those who came before us and steal from them? So I eventually did that over 51 years. But so the book is a cumulatively all the things I felt were the most powerful leadership qualities and strengths that made me successful. So read the book. It's an easy read. Take the ones you like and throw away the ones you don't like. And I think that makes the road less bumpy, less twisty. So that's what I mean by easier.
Well, it is a great read. You come across as being very authentic. Some of the stories made me chuckle, and some of them made me reflect as a parent. I've got two teenage daughters, so it's a great read on many levels. And Laura, one of her ex-players, one of Coach Kathy's ex-players, you were one of the co-writers. Now, when you were interviewing all these ex-players and staff, this 51 years worth, what themes surprised you? What came up that really caught your attention?
I think that it was the consistency of the threads that were through all these players spanning 4 or 5 decades, right? So have, these are truly multi-generational student athletes and now adults. And to hear from someone who played for Kathy back in the 1970s and to hear from someone who played for her in, just about 10 years ago, early 2000s, the consistency in what they took away from the experience was really powerful. That sort of ability of Kathy to evolve and stay relevant and what they took away from the experience kind of looked the same for many of those players, which those patterns are interesting from an observational standpoint. And I think just the where the people sort of lit up was in the storytelling. Everybody, there's not a single person who played for Kathy who does not have a story. And oftentimes the story involves humor, as Kathy mentioned. But that's really kind of that emotional connection that Kathy was able to make through and with all those players came through the stories that they told. And we've captured a sliver of them, I think. Kathy's always, still to this day, I think yesterday even, like, we forgot the story. There's one more to add, and every player she meets, we could just keep adding to that list. And that's really this tapestry, right, of all these stories. And together, Kathy's the reason they come together.
Well, actually, Jackie McMullen, the sports journalist, writes the introduction. And Kathy, in there, she says, Kathy, was far more interested in teaching her players how to unleash the untapped potential that lay deep within. That was her gospel. But Kathy, was that always the focus, or did that evolve over time?
Well, first of all, when I read the foreword that Jackie wrote, and I've stayed close with Jackie ever since she graduated from high school in the, I think, late 70s or whatever. We've stayed close, and she's just a very public figure. She's written so many books, and she's on TV all the time, and everyone thinks that I'm, famous because I hang around Jackie McMullen, but because she is very famous. So when she wrote the foreword, that environment and story she described actually brought me to tears. I was unaware that, she was the girl outside the office and too afraid to come in and all of that. And so, I guess I wasn't aware that when I peeked my head around the corner and tried to make her feel comfortable, I think that's just my nature. And I didn't know if I did it all by design necessarily. But I was so my coaching and my leadership style is instinctive, and it comes from my roots and how I was raised. And so relational leadership is really how I was raised and what I do naturally. Did I pay more attention to life skills because I didn't know basketball and I was hiding? I guess that could be what I did. I didn't have enough basketball knowledge because I didn't play. So I was teaching them life skills to fill in the gaps. And come to find out, that was the best thing you can do as a leader. You can, it's not, you are who you are as an athlete and as a person, and you really shouldn't try to separate them. They have to be the same to be the strongest. And so, that's how my leadership evolved. And even when I left, it was life skills that are important and relationships that are important, and they equal winning.
You talk about relational leadership a lot in the book. Could you describe what it means to you?
Relational leadership, especially when you are trying to lead a group of people and not a team sport versus individual sports, one size does not fit all. So you're not going to reach everybody just with straight line leadership. You have to build a foundation of relationships so that you can be genuine, so that you can know the strengths and weaknesses of those you're coaching. And it's actually exhausting to do it in the beginning, but once you create trust and you create a foundation of a relationship between you and your players and your players with each other, then you can get through anything. That's where mentorship can be paramount. That's where getting through adversity can be paramount. You can make a mistake and they will forgive you, or they can make a mistake and I will forgive them, because there's this foundation of trust. And so I believe I did it instinctually in the beginning, and then I read about it and learned about it, and I read from people like Brene Brown, and there's many others that just really resonated with me, and that's the leadership that I want to use. Now, there's a million. That's why I love what Laura's doing, and her knowledge of leadership is positively the best of anyone I know, and so I don't feel leadership is a one-size-fits-all either. But just for me, relational leadership was my way to be effective.
Laura, you came from the corporate world. You had a very senior career.
I survived the corporate world.
You survived the corporate world. Well, I think it was Mars, wasn't it? So a lot of people will think it was a lot of chocolate. So you've come out of it looking pretty good.
Nothing but candy and good times.
And now you've got this great consultancy you're running called Breakthrough, and you focus a lot on leadership. Tell us how the relational leadership you experienced with Kathy has informed the work you're doing today.
Yeah. In hearing Kathy describe her definition of relational leadership, I think, I picture this like network of people that is in this idea of leadership. We talk about leadership as, think of it typically as a ladder. My corporate career, I'm climbing this ladder to get into a position of leadership, when in reality, it really is this highly interpersonal, very interconnected network. And I think it's about relationships. It's about not just you rising to the top, but how you're impacting others. And that I saw in Kathy, in my early 20s, that example, it was refreshing and new. I hadn't seen that before. I was used to the, command and control, authoritarian, like don't mess with the boss sort of leadership style from some of my previous coaches. Not to say Kathy can't flip into that mode, but it was a very different style where she was very much involving others in also becoming leaders. It wasn't a single person or single definition of leadership. And I think, we were able to just little things like and a lot of teams do this. We elected our own captains, the team voted. Those captains had a lot of, I think input into how everything from practices were run to how we prepared for games. So there was a lot of collaboration in Kathy's leadership. And I think in terms of how she treated, her staff or anybody involved with the program, it was always with, like care and love and humor and respect. And it was not like this untouchable person that was at the helm. So that example, I think we want everyone to think like that and to behave like that and to lead like that. And so the way that, Kathy empowered us to see ourselves as leaders and become leaders in very different ways, that I think for me was the seed of the idea of the work that we do with lots of leaders of today, in the work that we do at Breakthrough, is helping others sort of see themselves as leaders in that way, and then pay it forward in that same manner.
Can I just drill a little bit further into leadership if we can? Kathy, at the start, you talked about the alumni. It's a deep one. 40 years alone at Harvard. The people that have come through your program have gone on to, they're listed in the book. You can see their names and some of the things they've gone on to do. There's governors in there and lawyers and all array of very impressive people with very impressive roles. But when they come back into your life, whether it's Alumni Week or they contact you, have the themes about the things they talk to you in the leadership space evolved over that time? And if so, what's the theme today?
That's a great question, Paul. So one of the great joys for me about being retired is I get to say yes to everybody. And I've probably I should be as big as a house. I have dinner. I have people over to dinner. I meet everybody everywhere, because it's just, everyone should have my life. I can't even describe how much I love Laura, and how much when she came back and told me what she felt about her experience at Harvard, because she was a captain, a tremendous leader for Harvard from the bench. I'm sure there were times in her career that she really wanted to play more and was not happy with me because I'm the one making that decision. Yet she was probably one of the greatest captains I ever had. And so then she goes off and goes into corporate America and gets rich and famous. And then comes back and says she loved her experience and wants me to write a book. I was blown away by that. I wasn't sure how this player, who I disappointed probably fairly consistently by not playing her enough, came back with such strong feelings. And so I just had two young, they graduated 5 or 6 years ago. They just were over here to dinner, and we were going through the Navy SEALs program, which was a toughness exercise at Harvard. Grueling. And I'm being nice saying this experience. One of these athletes literally told me how much I'll use the word hated the experience while she was going through it. And then 5 years later, here at dinner, she said, she now can look at it and say it was life-changing. It was, you have to get through it and come out of it and take some time to learn what it meant to you. But that's sort of what I get to experience with some of the most brilliant women in the country. And those are the conversations I have. They will say, well, I use act as if when I was giving birth, and I use perfect is boring in the boardroom. And, some of the things they made fun of me for, visualizations, affirmations, all the sports psychology hacks we used, where they really weren't doing them properly at Harvard and they were just pretending. They will come back and say, well, Kathy, why didn't you make me do it when I was at Harvard? And I'm like, I did. But, it takes wisdom and age, and sometimes where they are now appreciating their experience. And I'm so blessed to have them come back and tell me these stories, because they may or may not have made a lot of fun of me while they were at Harvard. Laura?
Why would you say something like that? We'd never make fun of you to your face.
Yeah, that's right.
And Laura, what about you and the work that you're doing with people today in the leadership space? What are the big themes that are coming through?
Yeah, I think I believe less. So this is in 2024. I think the most searched up word in the Merriam-Webster dictionary was authenticity. People were obsessed with this topic of being authentic, and I don't think that's the word for 2025. I think the leadership landscape is pretty chaotic right now, but I think people were really are seeking this deep feeling of being seen and being heard, and feel like they can be themselves, kind of bringing that full identity into the workplace. And I know we've experienced some backlash to that, I think, recently, which is unfortunate, but we will work through that. But I think this idea of being able to understand, have the self-awareness and then express yourself fully, authentically is a very powerful thing. And when we have a lot of people doing that within a team, within an organization, the connections are better, the cohesion's better, there's bonding, there's that trust that Kathy mentioned. So this sort of unlocking of that authenticity was something that people were sort of yearning for, and helping have, we provide outside perspective to help draw that out of them, to help say, okay, what is it about you, Paul, that makes you special, strong? What are your attributes as a leader, and what's your story as a leader? And helping people see that, articulate that, and then put that out to the world, in connection with that, whatever their goals might be. But that sort of tapping into that was really powerful. And I think where it has shifted for us in our business is not just about the individual, like, hey, helping you celebrate your authenticity, but very quickly translating that into how do you interact with other people? What is that? What are the team dynamics that are created when you are leading authentically, taking it to that next level, that sort of that ripple effect off the leader, moving away from just the person to more to that relational leadership that Kathy was describing earlier.
Well, Kathy, you talked in your answer just a minute ago about two of your catch cries. It's probably the words that you use so often. There's act as if, and the second one is perfect is boring. Now, I'd like to drill into perfect is boring a bit if we can, because I'm sure there's people listening to this that would love to embrace more of that ethos, that idea, but it takes time. How do you help someone understand that perfect is boring and the goal should be anything less than perfection?
Right. Well, here's what I did. and I will say it worked and it didn't work. I think that, but I will say this, every young woman, or almost every young woman who came to Harvard, in my opinion, was on that perfect road because they were the stars of their high school, the stars of their state. You go to Harvard, it's a very prestigious acceptance. I can't give you the numbers, but if you can get into Harvard, you are the best of the best in this country. It is truly that kind of a school. So I had women who were used to being absolutely the best, and now they arrive at a school and everyone around them is the same as they are. And that's a hard transition for not all of them, but many of them. So I was very aware if they were wound too tight. I was very aware that they needed some levity in their life. They needed to understand that mistakes are often good, and it's how you learn. So I tried to cultivate an environment where you embrace your mistakes and you understand that that's where you grow, that's where you learn. And I would often talk to players after a practice, after a game, who didn't make a mistake, and I would say, you didn't play very well. You didn't take any risks. You didn't go after it. So you're not going to grow. You're not going to reach your potential. So that's how I do it. And it's hard and I did it because I was one of them. I wanted, to be the right hairstyle. I wanted the right body image. I wanted to win every basketball game. And it gets exhausting to try to be perfect. So I just got too tired and got off that road. And so now I can see when a young person's on that road. And I really work hard to get them off. And I use humor. Like, I will make fun of you if you need to get up. I just told Kelly Black, I was just at a Harvard event, and her daughter is a freshman at Harvard, and she's getting straight A's as a freshman. And I said, Leah, get a life. Get a B. And I really believe that. I really believe it's okay to get a B if you worked real hard. So
I took that advice very seriously because I think I got lots of B's and maybe even a C even one. That makes me really...
Yeah, Laura got that for a different reason, Laura. Yeah. Not for this podcast.
That's a different podcast.
I want to talk a little bit more about it. My eldest daughter's just gone off to college. In Australia, it's more likely that the kids stay home, but my daughter's gone down to Canberra. And we were sitting around the table talking about perfection just before she went down, and this whole idea of, don't go for perfection, get the experience right. But I got a little bit of pushback saying, why wouldn't you go for perfection? What's wrong with it? Why wouldn't you go for it? How would you both answer that question?
First, I will say it's okay if you get perfection, but don't try to. Like, you might be that exceptional and that great that, all the stars are aligned and you get straight A's, or you have flow in your performance, or, things are perfect for you. But it's the process of getting there that will exhaust you and will frustrate you and will prevent you from taking risks. That would be my answer to that.
I would also add that I think this idea of perfection as being a destination is a falsehood. I think there's always something, bigger that you can be striving for in flexing your different ways. I think it's, more of a growth mindset to think about what's beyond this elusive, not ever achievable perfection. I think there's always some striving that could be driving you. But I think it's a false sort of trap to be aiming for, because I don't think it really exists.
I will also add that the more you try to strive for perfection, the less you stay present. And I am a stay in the moment, stay present, which means your focus is just what Laura said, not the outcome of perfection, but the process of getting there. And so you should feel good about how hard you worked in practice today. And, that's what you should be focused on rather than where you're going.
Terrific answer. I'll clip that out and we'll play that at the dinner table and then debate what you've both said.
Curious to hear what she says about it.
Kathy, I want to come back to something you say in the book. It's a quote that says, I tried to create both a very comfortable environment for them and a very uncomfortable environment that they needed to grow in. And this theme comes up a lot with coaches that I interview. One of them said, your job as a coach is to comfort the troubled and trouble the comfortable. But getting this balance right is difficult. I imagine it's harder in today's environment as well, pushing people, challenging them, comforting them. How can we all get better at finding this balance?
I don't know if I have a perfect answer, Paul, but I will say it's a fine line. I think all coaches, as you referred to, is not worried about it, but it's something we have to pay attention to. And especially in a team sport where you have, X amount of players on your team and one size is not going to be right for all of them. And so I think it's really important to, reevaluate and pay attention to too much, too little. Laura referred to it a little bit earlier. I'm a collaborator, so I use my team leaders to tell me how much is too much, how much is too little. I don't ask that from all my players because human nature will jump in and say, oh no, we don't need to run today. We're good. As opposed to your team leaders will generally tell you the truth. And so that's an important concept for me as a coach, is to involve my team leaders. It's their team. So if they need more, they need to tell me that. If they need less, they need to tell me that. And then I also believe that peer mentorship and peer relationships are important, because inevitably one player is going to think it's too hard and they will struggle. And that's where their relationships with their teammates, their coaches, etc., will get them through the adversity that everybody else is getting through a little more easily, I think. So, that's how I approach the toughness. And in that being said, I still, at the end of my career, I probably would self-evaluate and say, I could have been tougher. I often said that to myself.
Laura, what's your view on this line, this balance between challenging and comforting?
Yeah, I was thinking back to off the court sort of team bonding experiences that we had, not the ones that are for the other podcasts, but the ones for this podcast, where we the sanctioned activities where
Thank you, Laura.
We were put in situations to sort of put us outside of really anybody's comfort zone, whether it was like an outward bound type of ropes course activity where you were climbing walls and towing people like across trapeze, just crazy stuff that was pretty safe but a little bit dangerous enough, or rowing. I think we went on either kayaks or rowboats down this river, which was, none of us knew what we were, just going in circles, but just like putting us into situations where we are all equally in an uncomfortable or uncertain or new place. And that was almost like a way for us to experiment with how we would get through that together, and kind of see the different personalities come out and how we, finished the ropes course or got to the other side of the lake or the river, whatever it was. So I think those like safe experiment places where we could be uncomfortable, but know that, we had each other's back and nothing terrible was going to happen, were important ways for us to practice that. And then I think about the other, like, more psychological piece of this, like where a lot of the time that we spent with Kathy, when she wasn't coaching us on the court, was with her or her staff, like in their offices, just talking, and more of a the mental part of the game, the mental part of navigating life as a college student. And I think those were places where that was a safe place, right? It was oftentimes uncomfortable conversations for whatever reason for the person, whichever topic was one that was needing to be explored, I'll say. So I think that one-on-one time that was designed to get us just to open up and talk a little bit more so that we could understand each other better. For me, I'd never had that experience before, and that was at first, quite uncomfortable, but then finding that to be a place where you could really learn and grow even more so than learning how to fix my 3-point shot, right? That didn't matter as much. It was more the talking through those maybe uncomfortable, problem solving types of things.
Immersing yourself in all things soccer ahead of this summer's World Cup? I'm Alex Abnos, senior sports editor from The Guardian. Whether you're a soccer beginner or you know the game inside and out, we've got you covered. From one of the fastest growing soccer newsrooms, The Guardian brings you in-depth World Cup coverage that gets into the winners and losers on and off the pitch. Read, watch, and listen as our journalists connect the dots between the games, the cultures, and this political moment. We'll have daily newsletters throughout the tournament, a global perspective, and a squad of Americans, including me, on the ground with the U.S. national team. Plus, if you want to test your soccer knowledge, try On the Ball. It's a game in the Guardian app, and it's really, really fun. And if you're into stuff like this...
Well, I think the problem is if you give footballers an inch, they will take a mile.
Is it too much when it's this close?
It's a bit much. It's a bit too real. Maybe you could just talk with a slight delay.
Be sure to listen to our Football Weekly podcast for on-the-move expert analysis. The Guardian, bringing you the whole picture on soccer. Search Guardian Soccer for more.
I find this line fascinating. I moved home to Australia 2 years ago after 16 years as an expat. I walked back into the Australian workplace, and it's that the position of that line has changed, has through the course of my career, and I'm sure it'll change even further as we go along. And I think about sport, you get to challenge people a lot more than I think you do in the workplace. I think there's an unwritten rule that says you can't necessarily challenge someone in the same way that you can when you're in a team environment. Don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. Enough about me. I'm going to play a clip from Ted Lasso, and then I'm going to ask you, Kathy, about this clip. But first, let's hear from Ted.
Mate, what do I need to win?
2 triple 20s and a bullseye.
Good luck. You know, Rupert, guys have underestimated me my entire life. And for years, I never understood why. It used to really bother me. But then one day, I was driving my little boy to school, and I saw this quote by Walt Whitman. It was painted on the wall there. It said, "Be curious, not judgmental." I like that. So I get back in my car, and I'm driving to work, and all of a sudden, it hits me. All them fellas that used to belittle me, not a single one of them were curious. You know, they thought they had everything all figured out, and so they judged everything, and they judged everyone. And I realized that they're underestimating me. Who I was had nothing to do with it. Because if they were curious, they would ask questions. You know? Questions like, have you played a lot of darts, Ted? Which I would have answered, yes, sir. Every Sunday afternoon at a sports bar with my father from age 10 till I was 16 when he passed away. Barbecue sauce. Good game, Ruben.
Well, it's a great quote. It's a fantastic series. I'm sure I'll get in trouble from the producers for playing and inserting the clip, but I think most of the people listening are big fans of Ted. But Kathy, you put the quote in the book. So tell me, why does it resonate with you so much?
Well, first of all, I am also a Ted lover, as the rest of the world is, and it's funny because I relate to his authentic, non-traditional style of coaching, and I feel that, you know, I might be the female analogy of that when I first started out, because I didn't do anything traditionally at all, and I didn't, and that was either by design or by I didn't know what I was doing. So I love Ted, but I will also say that I learned as I got older to be less judgmental, and it's a much better way to live. I would often tell my players to try to meet each other where they are instead of trying to convince them that, you know, your way is the right way. I believe you can have opinions, but don't judge them as being right or being wrong. And just share and understand there's more than one way to do something, and there's usually 3 or 4 or 5 ways to do something, and your way is not necessarily the right way for everybody. And at a school like Harvard, where I would take 15 women from all over the country, all over the world, and they were very, very different. And the culture of that program had to be worked on. It wasn't like they automatically became best friends. They didn't. They had a tendency, as human nature will, to hang with their besties and, sort of ignore those kids that are boring or not the same as them. And so I really stressed to be non-judgmental and tried, and again, just you are responsible to have a relationship with every single player in this program, every single coach in this program, everybody in the inner circle. Your job, your commitment to this program is to have a relationship with them. Now, you can like some more than others, but you have to know everybody and work on that relationship. And I think just that's what Ted Lasso did. He was putting black with white and, the odd with the even. He was brilliant. And that show, that was one of the strong messages coming out of that show, I think.
And Laura, how does the idea of asking questions, not being judgmental, connect with you?
Yeah, I think, Kathy is a very curious person. She does ask a lot of questions. That's kind of how she would, I think, disarm folks, just getting to know people. That genuine curiosity, it happens very rapidly. She's able to, walk up to a complete stranger within 30 seconds, 60 seconds. She knows something new about them that, maybe their best friend didn't know. So she's got this way about her of using questions to get, kind of cut through that surface with somebody and get to know them a little bit more deeply. And sometimes she'll ask awkward questions. That's always, there's no questions that are out of bounds. So sometimes the more awkward questions get the more real response from people. And it's, you see it sort of in that way that she can quickly disarm people and make them more comfortable because, we kind of get through that discomfort together. I think about like Kathy too, like curiosity in terms of your profession. Like you coached for 51 years, but you weren't set in your ways in terms of how to run a practice or the plays you ran or the offenses, defense. Like you always were evolving and curious about what was the trend happening in training or strength and conditioning or the mental aspect of the game, and that sort of curiosity. And that you didn't even, you weren't self-judging to say, this is the best way, I'm going to keep doing it, this is the recipe, but you could stay adapting and evolving in that way. And I think that was, kept you coaching for a long time, but then kept you winning, which is, kind of a good part about being a basketball coach, I guess, was probably winning some games, but that I think contributed to your success.
I want to talk a little bit about, Kathy, you said something really fascinating. Your commitment in this team is to have a relationship with everybody on the team. In the years where that worked better than others, what was different with the team?
The leadership. Unquestionably the leadership. With my leadership, my staff leadership, my captain's leadership, my senior leadership. I don't feel leadership comes from one place. I feel it has to come from me because I'm driving the ship. So it's my job to make sure that my staff shares the same passions, energy, and priorities that I want. And that involves, player meetings X amount of times per week. And if someone was, not playing much or not a star, I would make sure an assistant coach was giving them extra attention, or I would give them extra attention so that everyone felt valued. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So, and then I would also do that with my captains and ask them to check in on someone that was hurting, someone that wasn't playing, someone that was trashing me in the locker room. Like, I rely on my leaders to address those issues because I'm not there. I can't control what goes on behind my back. And so the years where we're successful, the years where we reach our goals is highly related to the leadership we had, mainly from our captains and seniors.
And Kathy, did you ever experience a time at Harvard where, you've got these amazing student athletes. Obviously, Harvard's, I don't know how many presidents the place has produced. I know it's numerous ones, and there's people, it's a brand that's recognized all over the world. But did anyone ever come back and challenge you in saying, well, Kathy, Coach, what do you know about leadership? I'm taking Professor Porter's class over here, and he's a world expert. Did that ever happen? And if it did, how did you go about handling it?
That is a funny question. I did have, and I love her to death. In fact, I'm going to stay with her in 2 weeks at the Final Four. I did have a psychology major who asked me, did I ever think I was the imposter syndrome? And I didn't answer her. I said, gee, Kyle, I don't know. I'll think about that a little bit. And so I can't say that it never went through my mind, but I will say, I use the principle act as if a lot because my background and my experience was not the same, not what it should have been. I lacked training and experience and knowledge, and I was thrown into the fire without it. So I needed to survive. So I used my instincts, and again, I guess I would credit my parents for raising me well, because those instincts served me well as a leader when I didn't even know I was a leader.
And act as if was the lever you used in those moments to just push through and figure it out.
Yes. And everyone asks me, well, that's just fake it till you make it, or that's imposter syndrome, but it's really, really not. It's a proactive intention to act as if you have the strengths and qualities that you're trying to get, and you do it with body language and facial expressions, and you sort of harness all the processes of your brain, and you get there faster, and I tell this story often. I asked the first class of women I ever coached in 1971. There was a group of 5 or 6 players, and we were marginal in the first 2 years, and then we went undefeated for however long we went undefeated. And I said, why in those first 2 years when we were 0-11 and 500, why did you drink my punch? What was it about me? So I did not know what I was doing. I can't even remember what I did. And they said, because at the top of the list, they knew I cared about them, which is true. So that's the power of relational leadership. And 2, because I was so confident. And that's where I just laugh my butt off and say, way to go, act as if. Because I was not confident inside, and I was using the principle act as if.
Immersing yourself in all things soccer ahead of this summer's World Cup? I'm Alex Abnos, senior sports editor from The Guardian. Whether you're a soccer beginner or you know the game inside and out, we've got you covered. From one of the fastest growing soccer newsrooms, The Guardian brings you in-depth World Cup coverage that gets into the winners and losers on and off the pitch. Read, watch, and listen as our journalists connect the dots between the games, the cultures, and this political moment. We'll have daily newsletters throughout the tournament, a global perspective, and a squad of Americans, including me, on the ground with the U.S. national team. Plus, if you want to test your soccer knowledge, try On the Ball. It's a game in the Guardian app, and it's really, really fun. And if you're into stuff like this...
Well, I think the problem is if you give footballers an inch, they will take a mile.
Is it too much when it's this close?
It's a bit much. It's a bit too real. Maybe you could just talk with a slight delay.
Be sure to listen to our Football Weekly podcast for on-the-move expert analysis. The Guardian, bringing you the whole picture on soccer. Search Guardian Soccer for more.
Laura, you've been shaking your head vigorously during Kathy's answer. What is it you want to add to what Kathy said?
No, to go back to your question too, Paul, thinking, has anyone come back to Kathy and said, you weren't all that, or I didn't really learn that much. I would be shocked if that happened. They might, say something, at one time you said something, but I think, if we look at, the professors, and a lot of them are in the book. These are some of the greatest professors at Harvard Business School. They're looking to Kathy as a role model, an example of leadership. And back in the early 2000s, we had a psychology professor who was the guru in team dynamics and in leadership. Richard Hackman, he's since passed, but he was top of his field, and he asked if he could, be a part of our coach, professor coach program and sit on the bench and watch Kathy and observe Kathy and be in the locker room and listen to her. And he was, vigorously scribbling down notes and taking it all in and talking about it in his classes. And that happened at Harvard Business School. It's, it would embarrass Kathy to say how much impact she had on the other side of the river to the academic side of things. But she, I think, has that respect, beyond just basketball in terms of being that empowerment and leadership expert, I would say.
There's just something about great coaches, isn't there? There's just their stoicism, their selflessness, their leadership qualities. It's just something that makes them mysterious and fun to interview. I'm going to finish with one final quote, and I normally ask the final question about legacy to the coach, but in this instance, I'm going to spin that around. Kathy, I'm going to use your quote, and then Laura, I'd like to ask you the question. So in the book, Kathy says, I quickly learned that leadership is not an innate mystical gift. It's a learned ability to influence the attitudes and behaviors of others because you understand how to energize, motivate, and inspire them. It's a great sentence, and it sums up actually the way that many of the other people I've interviewed talk about leadership in this influence space. But Laura, what do you think is actually the legacy that Kathy's left with all the wonderful women she's coached?
Well, that's a big, hard question. To me, the word I keep coming back to, and it's on the cover of the book, but it's empowerment. And I think about specifically like what is underneath empowerment. It's giving others confidence and strength and helping them believe, in the best version of themselves. And I think that that ripple effect off of Kathy, this empowerment that she sort of imparted into us, and then hopefully we carry into our lives and do for others. That's what makes her impact so great. So it comes down to empowering, just as the title says, empowering, lives and leaders. I really do think that is her legacy.
Thank you, Laura.
Would you like to rebut, Kathy? Is there anything?
Yeah, you one rebuttal. That's it.
Yeah, I'm not one to ever. That's a question that you get asked a lot when you stay in one place for a million years, and I've never operated on. I don't know what my record is. I don't know how many anythings I've won, and so I really haven't thought about my legacy. I thought about this book and why I'm writing it, and I'm being rewarded with feedback that this book is it's an easy read, and it's great reminders for even people who have been coaching a long time. Trish Brown, one of the greatest college coaches in this state, played for me, has been coaching at Stonehill College for 6 years. She just read the book and called me and she goes, Kathy, I'm so glad I read the book. I forgot we did this. I forgot this. I forgot that. So that's what this book is. And that's what Laura convinced me would happen if I wrote it with her. Couldn't have done it without her for sure. And so that's important to me because I can see, unfortunately, parenting and leadership going in the wrong direction. And I want to get it back going in the right direction.
I think that's a pretty nice place for us to finish. Kathy, it's a great book. Congratulations again on getting it. You were writing it, I think, when I first interviewed you, and it's great to see it come to fruition, and it's so wonderful to connect with you again and hear how things are progressing. And Laura, thank you for coming along as well. It really is a great collaboration, and it was great to read your insights in the book too, as someone who's travelled the road from sport to corporate America and now into the leadership space.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Hi everyone, you have been listening to the great coach Kathy Delaney-Smith and the leadership consultant Laura Barnard. I hope you got a lot out of their discussion and found a couple of ideas that you can bring back to your own dinner table for discussion. They've both got such great energy, and there were many highlights in the interview. But the ones that stuck out for me when I went back over the edit were Kathy's mantra of perfect is boring, and how she had to work hard with her Harvard players to get them to understand and embrace this idea so that they could reframe mistakes and see them as learning opportunities. her learning of being less judgmental as she aged, and her acceptance that there is more than one way to do something if you are willing to be open as a leader or team member. And her steadfast view that leadership can never just come from one place, but that you must have an array of leaders in any time who share your energy, passion and priorities. And just before we go, if you have any feedback, then please let us know. Just like Ben Cross, who after listening to our interview with Brian Gorgian said, "This was a terrific listen." Thanks, Ben. The interaction with the people around the world who listen gives us great energy and keeps us going. So if you have any feedback or comments, please let us know. I try to answer all of them and I love hearing from people. All the details on how to connect with us are in the show notes or on our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com.
Immersing yourself in all things soccer ahead of this summer's World Cup? I'm Alex Abnos, senior sports editor from The Guardian. And whether you're a soccer beginner or you know the game inside and out, we've got you covered. Read, watch, and listen as our journalists connect the dots between the games, the cultures, and this political moment. We'll have daily newsletters throughout the tournament, reporters on the ground with all the big teams, and the legendary Football Weekly podcast. The Guardian, bringing you the whole picture on soccer. Search Guardian Soccer for more.